We're live. Good morning. It's Thursday, January 8th, 2026. Just a little housekeeping for the committee. If anybody hasn't gone on to the website or gone to Monument Farms and watched that video of the state of farming, it's probably it's a longer video, very beautifully done, thoughtfully done. Talked about the challenges of what Vermont farmers are facing right now. I'm blown away with the production of it. So if you have them in a Monument Farms, if you have any problems finding it, let me know. I'll get it sent to you guys. But a very, very great video where I think you guys would be impressed with that. We are honored today, and I say that in a way because I have really enjoyed the developing relationship that James Pepper and his group and I have developed from the Cannabis Control Board. We went on a couple tours this summer and we've had thoughtful discussions, and I'm not going to get into all of what James's presentation is going to be and his group, but I think that we can I'm very optimistic about a new relationship that can be formed where we can all work together for the common goals of what the hemp industry and the cannabis industry is in the state of Vermont. And again, just very appreciative of the relationship that's been started, and I'm glad to have you in, and welcome, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Very gracious introduction. My name is James Pepper. I'm the chair of the Cannabis Control Board. Around the room, you see the other two board members of the Cannabis Control Board. We are a 3-member board, and our general counsel, Gabe Gilman. This is hemp is a very tricky issue. So you guys are starting the year off with a complicated topic.
Appreciate that.
Yes. I did prepare, just because sometimes some visuals are helpful. I did prepare just a very kind of slapdash PowerPoint, which I'm happy to put up on the screen if that's helpful.
Yes.
But really, I think a lot of it, I think we just need to talk through some of these issues.
I'll say what James is doing that. I've kind of made it kind of clear in my mind, and I've said it enough times now where I see that hemp is a non-intoxicant and cannabis is. That's where I kind of draw the line in my mind as far as where it's at. So I think we might see some of that today.
Yeah, and I think that it's always really important to start with a basic premise that marijuana and hemp are one plant with two names. This legal fiction exists as a weird quirk in our history, our kind of tortured relationship with cannabis over the last 50 or 100 years. What you see is that marijuana is a Schedule I controlled substance. The Controlled Substance Act was passed in 1970. It places various substances into one of 5 schedules or categories, depending on its abuse profile and whether it has accepted medical uses. So Schedule I is the most restrictive, and it's defined as having no accepted medical uses and a high potential for abuse. Other Schedule I drugs are up on the board. They include LSD, heroin, ecstasy. These are, just heavily restricted in the state, or in the country, sorry. But you fast forward to 2014, really, and there was a large number of hemp growers that said, hey, there's a lot of medical value there's a lot of agricultural applications for hemp, whether that's for making clove, fiber, seed, hemp oils, or CBD. And so they were this kind of coalition able to create a separate category of marijuana or cannabis. in 2018, the Farm Bill, or the Agricultural Improvement Act, 2018, created this legal fiction between hemp and marijuana. And I use marijuana. It's got some kind of derogatory undertones to it historically. So, you know, I'm using it because, again, cannabis is hemp and marijuana. So it's complicated. It really should be high THC cannabis or low THC cannabis. So instead, hemp marijuana. But essentially, they created a definition, a legal definition of low THC marijuana that would be considered an agricultural product, removed from the schedule altogether. You know, treated the same as a cucumber or, you know, a tomato. And the distinction here is that it essentially has virtually zero THC. I mean, it's the 0.3% because there's always going to be some amount of THC when you grow cannabis. But, you know, when you're talking about a plant with no more than 0.3%, that's virtually no THC. And it's, you know, like you think about like non-alcoholic beer or like decaf coffee, there's still trace amounts of caffeine in decaf coffee, but it's virtually caffeine free. That's the kind of equivalent for hemp. So, you know, hemp, this federally, this led to a huge boom in the hemp industry, people growing hemp for CBD. It turns out that there wasn't as big of a market for CBD or for hemp as kind of the growers anticipated. And so what they started to do in the subsequent years after 2018 is look at that definition and find ways to kind of poke holes in it and find ways to make THC products, but call them hemp products. So there's the 0.3% loophole. So there's a 0.3% THC when you're talking about a plant is very minimal. But when you're talking about a product like a 50-gram candy bar, well, you can pump that with 150 milligrams and still be under that 0.3% on a dry weight basis threshold. So that started to happen. Start seeing kind of candy bars and seltzers that gummies that, you know, just weigh more and you have a lot more THC. And I use the 50-gram, 150 milligrams of THC example here because on the adult use cannabis side, we have a per package limit of 100 milligrams. So this product, which is in interstate commerce, would be illegal in the state of Vermont if it were grown or sold at a cannabis dispensary. So that's one loophole. The other one is the THCA loophole. THCA is essentially a precursor to THC, the intoxicating element of cannabis. You know, you burn THCA and it turns into THC. So, you know, you could essentially sell a joint that's, for all intents and purposes, cannabis or marijuana, and just say that it's THCA and not THC, and until it's, you know, lit on fire, smoked. And so we're seeing, you know, proliferation of these, you know, joints, you know, that show up in gas stations, things like that. And the claim is this is THCA, it's not THC. We're compliant with the Farm Bill. You can even see on this label, it says U.S. Farm Bill compliant. It's pretty typical of these types of products. And then there's the derivatives loophole. You may remember it said Delta-9 THC and all of its derivatives. So what you can, one way to make synthetic Delta-9 THC is to take CBD and hit it with a like hydrochloric acid and convert it into Delta-9. You can also convert it into Delta-8 THC, which has very little, you know, like kind of safety, you know, studies have been done, certainly nothing long-term about the effects of Delta-8 THC on humans. And other intoxicating cannabinoids, the alphabets, all the other ones that you hear about. So these are the three main loopholes that have emerged since the passage of the Farm Bill. And, you know, the basic gist is, well, because the source material is hemp, or we exist in one of these loopholes, that none of the state regulations around who can buy the products, you know, 21 plus, how they can be advertised, how they can be regulated at all, tested, labeled, packaged, labeled, apply, or tax provisions apply to these products because the source material is hemp. So that has created chaos around the country, as you may imagine, with cannabis regulators that kind of force cannabis growers and manufacturers into this very narrow, regulatory framework. And then you just go online and you see products that, Snoop Dogg is repping, or Seth Rogen, Cheech and Chong. Even edible arrangements now will sell you THC infused hemp derived products. Some of these, I just point out, have more THC in them, again, that would be allowed in an adult use product, but they call it hemp derived or full spectrum CBD products. And these are the more reputable brands, because there's the whole group of non-reputable brands that just fully do the copycat products that have thousands of milligrams of THC in them, and all kind of just claim that this is Farm Bill compliant. And so the FDA has come out and said that these are illegal for interstate commerce. That THC, whether it's and CBD, whether it's hemp derived or cannabis derived, is a drug and does not fall under the dietary supplement framework. They've also said, kind of in the same breath, that we don't have the resources to police any of this. Just a major interstate market has emerged over the last 7 years. And I want to pause here and say that there are Vermont companies that are participating in this market, and they should not be painted in the same brush as these folks, because I'm going to get to this later, but we passed an emergency rule about these types of products, and they have all been 100% compliant with our emergency rule, and they have been incredibly transparent with what their operations are and what their business model is. So I know I'm painting kind of a bleak picture about the hemp world, but the Vermont hemp companies are actually begging for regulation.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I really thought it was important and to develop the relationship between the ag world and the Cannabis Control Board is to my role. I see it as guiding our farmers who want to grow a product, whether it's carrots or cannabis, that they understand what the rules are. And as James just said, there seems to be some bleeding in there. And if we're going to try to help our farmer to be able to get into the world of simply deducting expenses, being able to go for grants, being able to put their money someplace, and all of that. If we're trying to do that, we've got to understand really what the rules are. And I don't think that the rules, I think the rules have been fairly clear as far as where the Cannabis Control Board is at, but I don't think that, I think there's just a lot of pushing going on as far as people saying, yeah, but we're hemp, but we're hemp, but we're hemp. I think that there's a lot of people that want to play in both worlds, and as we're learning now. So again, just to kind of clarify where we stand.
Yeah. And again, I just want to highlight, this is incredibly complicated stuff, it really is. And it gets even more complicated because as we progress, the rules of the road are changing at the federal level and the state level. So Mitch McConnell, who is the kind of grandfather of the 2018 Farm Bill, the hemp portion of it, because Kentucky is a major hemp producer, earlier I should say last year, drafted an op-ed saying that he's closing these loopholes. He said he's closing the loopholes, that these were unintended consequences of the way that the hemp definition was drafted, and a shock to everyone, really, because this is hard for people to understand, and it's controversial, and it's a major industry in the United States. But in a shock to everyone, the bill to reopen the federal government had a provision in it that actually kind of systematically closed all four of those loopholes, all the three of those loopholes that I described at the beginning. And it had a delayed implementation date of 1 year. So what that bill did is they said, as far as THCA, that distinction no longer applies. You look at total THC, it's got to be less than. They said that any container can have no more than 0.4 milligrams total THC. So those 150 milligram chocolate bars, they're not going to exist. If 0.4 milligrams is the limit per container limit in a year. It also just eliminated the synthetics, the delta 10s, the THCOs, the ones that are created from kind of chemical processes, don't exist naturally in cannabis. So that, of course, sent a shockwave through the hemp industry. No one really knows what's going to happen. If you talk to people in the hemp industry, they are 100% convinced that this is going to get changed through federal legislation. What that looks like, no one knows. Subsequent to that, the passage of that bill, President Trump recently signed an executive order that was on its face about rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. But the main meat of that executive order was actually directing his administration to work with Congress to create a new definition of full spectrum hemp and set thresholds for how much THC could be allowed in a CBD product. So again, like Congress, it doesn't have a great track record right now passing a lot of legislation, and this is certainly probably not like a priority for them, but we'll see. I mean, there's, it's this executive order directs his staff to kind of work this out. So so again, this happened in December 18th, 2025. So the sands are shifting under our feet very dramatically. If nothing were to change, we could build a hemp program in Vermont, but it would be almost like a cannabis light. It would be purely intrastate within the borders of our state if the products had more than 0.4% or 0.4 milligrams of THC in them, which almost all of them do. Hemp regulation in Vermont, I'm not going to go into all the details here because we started in 2013 with a hemp pilot program. When the Farm Bill passed, the legislature came in and said, you got to really kind of ramp up this program and put some regulation around it. So you gave the Agency of Agriculture a lot of rulemaking authority over the products to make sure that they were safe. They promulgated that rule in 2020. When you created the Cannabis Control Board, the Agency of Agriculture kind of said, well, this really should be over at the Cannabis Board now, at least the product side of things, because these are like THC products pretty much. You did kind of a mix. In 2018, you directed the Agency of Agriculture to establish this pilot program. You shall establish a program. In 2022, you should turn that shall into a may. And then you gave the Cannabis Control Board authority over hemp products. And so what's happened in the kind of intervening years since 2022 is the Cannabis Board has created rules around products. And the Agency of Agriculture has stopped their hemp program. And they've reverted all hemp growers to USDA regulation. And right now, no one is regulating the processors. So we have authority over the products, and we don't have authority over the kind of processes that lead to those products. And that's a problem for the industry. They, as Chair mentioned, they need to have a letter. They need to have a letter from the state or a license from the state or a permit or something that they can present to their insurance companies, to their banks. If the VEA ever comes knocking on the door, they want to show that this is a legitimate business. And right now they don't have that. What I put here is this is the you directed us. This is the language where you gave us control over all cannabinoids, whether they're hemp derived or cannabis derived. And we passed an emergency rule back in 2023, I believe, it just prohibited the synthetics. So no creating fake Delta 9 from CBD, no creating the kind of alphabet soup of cannabinoids using CBD. And then we put our own thresholds as to what's an intoxicating product and what's not. Whether, and we said 1.5 milligrams or less, go ahead and do whatever you're going to do with that. We're not going to regulate it. Anything above that is converted into a cannabis product, and it has to be sold at a felony store. Has to meet all of the kind of, it's got to be taxed at 20%. It's got to, meet all of the AGA requirements, all of the testing, labeling, packaging requirements of a typical cannabis product. That's kind of the situation that we're in right now, where we're coming to you now, or I guess the industry is coming to you, the hemp industry is coming to you and saying we need regulation, and we are already holding ourselves to a very high standard that the Vermont companies are. That's what I really appreciate about them. But the question that is being presented to you by us is, you have about 50 pages of rulemaking authority for the board over cannabis products. Certainly the industry doesn't want, that level of scrutiny over their products, and they don't want them to be sold just at adult use dispensaries. They want them to be sold as an alternative to alcohol at the grocery store or convenience, an alternative to beer. And so I think there's a lot of questions that we would have for you as to how, if we were to take this on, the CCB, how do you want it to look? And I think these are just a few basic questions. The first one is one that I just asked the hemp industry is, hey, listen, 90% of your sales are to out-of-state markets. Do you really, if this point, sorry, it's not 0.4%, if it's 0.4 milligrams of THC goes into effect in November, those sales will be illegal and they will be enforced at that point because it'll be clear if these loopholes have been closed. So 90% of your, if this is purely going to be a Vermont market, does this even pencil out for you? You can't make 1 million units of gummies that are 1.5 milligrams and ship them across state lines. There's not enough demand in the state for that. So that's really more a question for the industry. A question for you all is who should do this? I think the CCB is well positioned to take this on because we're building a state reference lab, so we can do the quality assurance testing. We can do we know we've been regulating cannabinoids now since 2020, so we have some background in this. And I think I won't speak for the Agency of Agriculture, but privately I think they're willing to kind of. Obviously they stopped their hemp program altogether, so I think they're ready to kind of hand it off.
Well, and I think that's where the involvement has come as far as this part. I think it's a big mistake for them to hand that off because we can live in both worlds as well. We do it already with the CAPO permits, working with A&R and all of that. So I think what I want to be very careful about stepping on the regulatory toes of where you guys are. And my whole intent is to give our farmers the framework of where they need to live. There's another problem that's been going on, and again, my thought process is to make more opportunity for Vermont farmers, and I'm going to frame it, and I hope that you can talk about it a little bit more, which is that we don't have enough hemp in our market being grown in Vermont right now, and so we're importing hemp that are over the limits. They're basically and you'll get the language right because we're going to make a lot of mistakes as far as how we talk about this as we learn about it. But they're basically, in my mind, transporting marijuana into our state against federal law. And yes, those hemp products, at the end of the day, if they're following what they're supposed to be, are being reduced down to within the limits so that they can still qualify as hemp. My goal would be to figure out a way of how we can not starve these farmers, these producers from their product, but give an on-ramp to say, okay, well, in 3 years' time, we're not going to allow that anymore. So you producers get with your farmer and start making contracts with them to grow what you need to keep it within state, to give our farmers chances to basically build their market. So where am I wrong with that?
No, you're absolutely right. So, I mean, essentially, THC is an ingredient in these products. And so, what the traditional business model is not universal in all of the Vermont businesses, but is to contract with someone in Minnesota or Oregon to just ship pure THC distillate across state lines. It never reaches the public, but it's used as an ingredient. So it's reduced down to that either 1.5 or whatever the kind of whatever market they're shipping it to. So it's really just an intermediary. But of course, from a state law perspective, that THC distillate, I mean, that's trafficking THC, it's trafficking cannabis. And from the federal perspective, same thing. They just, again, are just not prioritizing this for enforcement. So, and we don't have enough hemp growers in the state currently or manufacturing capacity to do that work here. Unless we really use the cannabis industry, the cannabis licenses to allow them to kind of cross-pollinate the hemp. But it would take a little bit of time for us to build that capacity in order to make sure that all the ingredients were either grown here or processed here. I mean, the hemp flower itself, as long as it's under 0.3%, can cross state lines legally. That's not going to change with the new language. But the manufacturing of it into this intermediary product, we probably don't have the capacity currently. So just, and again, the hemp producers have been very open and honest about that. Like, so, you know, it's not like they're trying to hide the ball. They know that they exist in this gray area and it's tenuous and the sands are shifting under their feet. But, you know, that's something they've been pretty open about, that they would need some kind of on-ramp if we were going to, you know, just require all the THC, they would stop the process, they stop allowing THC distillate to cross state lines. And then, of course, you know, the whole game for them is where can these products be sold, and what sort of testing and safety standards. I think they, you know, what I have heard from the hemp industry, and you should just hear from them directly, but what I've heard is they're already compliant with the kind of cannabis level testing and sanitation and sanitary requirements. A lot of them are compliant with kind of current good manufacturing practices. But I don't think that they're going to be, and they actually are okay with being age gated, but that creates its own kind of challenges as in 21 plus for these products. I think where the rub is they want to be selling at convenience stores, right, and grocery stores. They don't want to be limited to either 802 spirit stores or you know, cannabis.
And that in itself right there is unfair to the cannabis market or to the marijuana growers and the sellers of it. I mean, we're getting pressured right now for them to get into farmers markets and all of that. And to me, you got to have that clear distinction as far as, hey, what fair for one and fair for the other. I mean, if somebody's heard me talking about this long enough, and I've talked about it a fair amount, is that you know, you knew what you were getting into when you applied for licenses and all of that stuff, but it just seems like a one side of it is kind of blurring those lines intentionally. Not all of them, and as you've said, they are looking not to pit one against the other as far as in the hemp world, but you just seem to have these people who want to follow the rules and are looking for clarity and want to be that good partner, and the other ones are deliberately trying to become THC producers and not have the same scrutiny and the same licenses and the same requirements.
Yeah, and that's why this is why we come to you all, because if you just said, hey, this is the Vegan shall create a program for hemp, I mean, we'll have to you know, how much regulation is going to be, I think, really a political and policy determination. The board's not really well suited to handle. I think these are determinations that this body should be making, you know, about where these products can be sold, what level of scrutiny they should have, I mentioned the 21 plus, the age gating of these products. They're, from what I understand, they're all for that, and a lot of people, they know that THC is for adults, it's not for kids. But how do you do it? If you, like, the Cannabis Control Board is a 7-member compliance team. You can't be in, 4,000, stores every year.
Right.
So,
And that's where, yeah, I think that's where the agency of agriculture can help with that as far as to bring that people power in. But it's going to take working together and not just somebody brushing their hands off and saying, well, we're done with that or whatever. Questions?
I can take this down. I think, we said through emergency rule and then final rule, the intoxicating threshold at 1.5 milligrams of THC. That is what I think would be considered a low dose of THC for an adult. But that's really, we went through the rulemaking process. So the legislature had the opportunity to weigh in on that through rulemaking. But I think that you may want to clarify that. Is that the dose that you think actually is the threshold between intoxicating and non-intoxicating?
Yeah, I mean, I know. No, and that's where we lean on you. That's why I think there can be a partnership here.
Yeah.
But there needs to be people that stay in their lanes and truly working as partners. Say, okay, well, we're going to take care of this part of it, and then you're going to take care of that part of it. We're not going to second guess one another. We're gonna work together and just tell us, we're over here and you're over there. And tell us where we can coexist. And but I do have an interest in mainly because I want to open the markets up in a way to where I think that we might be losing a company in Grand Isle area that is hemp, and I think they might be in it. First glance, when I heard that they were having a lot of difficulties, the easiest thing is to blame the state for giving them a hard time. And but as we spent some time together this summer, I think this Cannabis Control Board was put into an unenviable position of getting into the party, not on their own doing, but getting into the party a little bit late and then saying, no, I mean, this is the way it needs to work. And but at that time, I see all sides of it that I'm sort of rambling here a little bit, but I'll clean it up in a minute. I just think that there needs to be, as we've said, clear business models so that people can make investments into this business and have some expectations about how it's going to turn out for them. And are they within the law or they're not within the law? And I think it's kind of a lot of these people have gotten ahead of where the regulations are. And so that's why they're asking for clear regulations. Hey, we want to be in this business. Tell us where we can go get our monies, or tell us where the rules are so that we can go get monies and we can run this system with what the minute of it is for Vermont. So rambled a little bit.
No, I mean, you have a little bit more background because you went and visited these businesses and you saw what they're doing and you've seen their operations and you've seen the kind of scope of the issue. So, I mean, it's really hard to really understand this without actually getting your hands on some of these products and going to the manufacturing facilities. But yes, I mean, the questions that I have for this committee are, do you want the laundry list of rulemaking authorities that we should have at the board? Do you want to, we've already drafted a few possible options for you. They like the light touch option where we just kind of really just focus on getting these people registered and getting them, getting that kind of legitimizing them as far as, their banking insurance needs. And just really, as far as 21, age gating of the products, just leave it up to a complaint process. If someone's complaining that, their kids bought this thing, then we'll go investigate it, kind of after the fact. But, and then there's a more kind of bring them in line with like Cannabis Light, they're a cannabis company. they need to be subject to the federal regulation, but they can sell their products at convenience stores.
But would you mind if I just
Complete.
kind of for a second?
Just tell us you are. I know you're introduced, but people.
Sure. Kyle Harris, Cannabis Control Board, and I was actually at the Agency of Agriculture when the rules for hemp were initially drafted. We commented to USDA, and I think what might be an important takeaway if a partnership between the Agency of Agriculture and the Cannabis Control Board is something that this committee and the larger body are really interested in, is where and how that baton is really passed off.
Yeah.
Initially, the Vermont hemp program operated under the 2014 Farm Bill. And when the 2018 Farm Bill was passed, you had to get a USDA approved plan to regulate hemp at the state level. There was a lot of changes that needed to happen between what was in the rule from a hemp program perspective under the 2014 pilot and what ended up becoming necessary under the 2018 program. And at the Agency of Agriculture, we made a lot of those changes to kind of be in, to get a USDA approved plan. But when the Cannabis Control Board was formed, around the time we all, stood up this market, the Agency of Agriculture gave up their USDA state approved plan. So from a hemp grower perspective right now, they're regulated directly through USDA AMS. The Agency of Agriculture doesn't do anything on farm from a hemp specific perspective. I'm not sure if there's an example, and I mean, the cloudiness is what's going to happen in November. Is this going to continue? Is this not going to continue? But I'm not sure if there's an example of a state asking for that authority to regulate hemp at the farm level from a grower perspective back after they've given up a state plan, if that makes sense. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, considering the sands are shifting as James alluded to earlier, we don't know what's going to happen in November. There's a lot of people with a lot of opinions, but is the thought process, at least in my head, is it ag kind of taking it through the farm field until it becomes turned into something else, and the Cannabis Control Board does the process and the products, so on and so forth. But there's some other questions that I think we can ask of the Agency of Agriculture through our conversations, but I think it's important for this committee to consider what appetite does the Agency of Agriculture have to kind of try and get that program back from USDA.
Yeah. I think that's where I see it as far as how you just said it. For us to be able to clearly communicate what their responsibilities, or what type of product can you produce, and where does that product put you? Are you on this side or are you on that side? And also add that product in the field, be able to guide them as far as what their responsibilities are, and be able to keep them in their lanes, so that we can help them through grants. We can help them become farmers. They're growing carrots or they're growing cannabis, and it's either hemp or marijuana, and be able to guide them enough to where we can help their business model succeed. And the regulatory part of it, I believe, is on your guys' side of it. And for us to say, listen, okay, it's left the field, basically. The horse has left the barn, the product's left the field. Now you're moving to the cannabis control part of it. This is our job is done here. We've guided you. We've told you. We've helped you every bit of the way. We've tried to get you dollars to grow your product. The abilities for you to deduct all of your expenses, just like real farmers do, and all of that stuff. But now your product's done. It's going to the marketplace. We're going to pass the baton to the Cannabis Control Board. And that's how I kind of see that relationship. I don't want to be in your guys' lane. I want to be the best person that we could be for Vermont farmers, and give them the opportunity to grow and make money, and give them the rulemaking that they need to do so they can put their business model in place. But once they cross that line, once the product comes out of the field, the baton gets passed. That's kind of the simplistic view, of where I'm kind of at with that.
And that's just the next evolution of what did happen in 2022, which is he gave us authority of products, but not the producers. And I think it's becoming more and more clear that we should also have, regulatory oversight over the election methods
Right.
and register these products. Because honestly, we can't depending on what happens in November, we can't keep the out-of-state products away from us. There is interstate commerce, theoretically,
Right.
you know,
Very powerful stuff.
so we should be registering them and holding those out-of-state products to the same standard as we do for the Vermont products. And because the Vermont products are already setting pretty high bar, the hemp products, the hemp producers in the state are doing a good job. And we should be able to hold the Snoop Dogg and the Cheech and Chong products that have the same standards that will be coming into the state.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I know. And keep the bad stuff, the copycat stuff, the stuff that's clearly appealing to children or marketed as kind of a, intoxicating Funyun or whatever, Dorito.
What world are we living in that the Cheech and Chong and the Snoop Dogg is this gold standard?
Well, they at least have, lawyers and they have a reputation.
They have the street cred.
I can tell you.
Brand recognition.
Brand recognition, exactly right. It's what it is. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at times it is useful, I think, and helpful to figure out good questions to ask by looking across the rest of the country. I assume that we're not in this space alone. How do other states do it is what I'm trying to get at. How do they regulate?
So the states that don't have adult use cannabis programs, it's pretty much free reign on these hemp products. That's where a lot of when I say that 90% of the business for these hemp products is out of state.
Mm-hmm.
That's people shipping Florida, Virginia, and places that don't. And so you can have I think in Virginia you can have like a 10 milligram THC infused. That's the threshold. It's a patchwork essentially. And what we're seeing right now is this bill passed in November that kind of closed these loopholes, delayed it for a year. And the cannabis regulators are all looking at, okay, well, how do I make an in-state hemp market? How do I license these hemp growers? This is all new though, because they're assuming, the cannabis regulators are assuming that the law is not going to change. That, it takes a tremendous amount of political will to get any bill passed. And so that even with the Trump executive order or not, that this is going to be, it's essentially you're going to have, hemp companies are going to be treated like marijuana companies, cannabis companies. They're just going to be able to sell in different places. So they're all they're all preparing for an intra-state market and not an interstate market. The hemp industry, again, is just really bullish on that. They're going to find a common sense intrastate level of THC, acceptable threshold of THC that's going to apply nationwide. That will allow them to continue to operate in some capacity.
And how do our thresholds compare to other states?
So that's when we set that threshold, it was based upon looking around at every other legal adult use state that had tackled this. There weren't a ton of them that had tackled this. We're right in the middle. I mean, some of them, they were pretty much right in the middle, 1.5. And a low dose, I think it was some federal agency, maybe the FDA said that, a standard dose of cannabis is 5 milligrams, and that is the dose in Vermont for an adult use product.
Mm-hmm.
So 1.5 would be considered a low dose. But some states set it at 0.5 milligrams. Some states say 0.
We seem to have done a better job with alcohol. I mean, it's pretty cut dry.
Yeah, alcohol. Of course, 100 years to get.
Well, yeah.
Well, I ask that you be patient with us, and we're going to be looking for your guidance as well. And the education is very important for us, and we want to be a partner. We don't want to be an adversary. We want to find a way to give great guidance to our farmers and, so we want to play a role. I'm being very bold by saying that because I haven't had deep discussions with the agency as far as what their role wants to be, but we will as we move forward. And I hope that we are going to get a chance to talk again. We are working on some language, and as of we'll kind of keep on going. But just want to thank you for the developing partnership and just teaching us on how it all works. We'll be asking a lot more questions.
That's great. And I mean, as we move towards November 13th, when this new law takes effect, now the picture will become clearer. Is there going to be a THC threshold that would allow interstate commerce? And I think that will be highly relevant to whether this hemp industry actually exists.
So I think our next step is going to be to talk with the agency.
Yeah.
And then at some point in time, get everybody together and all of that. But I'm very proud of this committee for a lot of reasons. But one of them is that they won't shy away from the tough tasks. I think this is a tough task. I really, really do. But we're up for it. And again, at the end of the day, I just want to create more opportunity for Vermont farmers and to give them both sides a level playing field and put expectations and rules in place, and then pass the baton to you folks. So that's where we want to get to. Yes. Yeah.
Just relatively new industry that we've had in this state. And I say relative, the past 5 years or so. And we have seen businesses flood in, close. Can you give the Reader's Digest version of where we're at and what you're hearing from, Burlington, the White River, Brattleboro?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. And I normally start out with that presentation.
Sure.
I think we have 571 individual licensees. The vast majority of those are cultivators, and the vast majority of our cultivators are of the smallest tier 1 small cultivators. 75% are tier 1 small cultivators. They are an incredible engine of ingenuity. A lot of them were legacy market operators. They brought their genetics into the market. So I think it's fair to say that we have the most exciting market as far as cannabis market in the country. Mostly just because of the design that the legislature kind of put in place, the foundation. We have over, I think, 5,000 registered products, unique products. We have, I think, 108 retailers. They are clustered in various towns because of the presumption that a town can't sell cannabis unless the voters have opted in. So you see, 14 in Burlington, 0 in Williston, 0 in South Burlington. So that creates that drives the public health people crazy. You have to walk by 7 cannabis shops to get to school. It's not like good luck. But as far as the kind of business failures, we're not seeing a tremendous amount of fall off, but it may be coming because essentially in the first couple of years, demand is exceeding supply as you're ramping up. Then it kind of starts to level out. And meanwhile, in the kind of background, you have New York that's kind of put a string of cannabis shops right along the western border of the state that is taking a lot of the consumer traffic away from Vermont. New Hampshire still hasn't legalized, so we're getting a lot of the New Hampshire border traffic. And the market really hasn't evolved all that. I mean, it's matured, certainly, but the regulations, the statutes that underlie those haven't kept pace with some of our other neighboring states. And so the things like farmers markets, things like kind of social consumption, we just haven't picked those up yet. They're not permitted. So really, we've paused issuing new retail licenses and we've paused issuing new cultivation licenses because we think that the supply and demand on the cultivation side, it's pretty even out. And if we add more capacity, it's just going to further depress the cost of cannabis and crunch people's the profitability. But I think and of course the cards are stacked against any cannabis business with the tax implications, the banking cost of banking, right? The regulatory compliance, the fact that we still have we have these hemp products that can be delivered to your door through the mail. It's just and we still have less market, there's no arresting our way out of the market. It's just, and then continue to exist kind of alongside. So we need to have the regulated market be able to provide the same services, products on the regulated side, so that people actually have a choice between the regulated market and the unregulated market. I know next door, they're working on a kind of big omnibus cannabis bill as far as the regulated market side. And if you guys do hemp work, then we're kind of hitting both sides. But we've seen, I forget how many, we do interviews with anyone who's exiting the market to see ask why. Most of the people point to the cost of banking, the lack of relationships with retailers to get into their stores. And we may see more drop off this year.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We good? Yep. Well, I want to thank you very much.
Yeah.
And we'll be back in touch.
Great.
And thank you for the education, very valuable for us. And again, thank you for being patient.
Yeah, thank you all.
Great, we'll take a 5-minute break.